The importance of culturally competent counselors, counseling Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. Before we discuss how to be an effective and competent counselor for the Asian American and Pacific Islander (API) population, we're going to use a cartoon segment, highly exaggerated, to examine what could go wrong if counselors are not sensitive to their clients' unique backgrounds and stories. If you notice errors in the counselor's approach, please jot them down. We will review this cartoon again after our main presentation and see how we could help the counselor find more success with the API population in the future. This is Graham Jones, a relatively novice counselor who recently opened a private practice. Graham is well-intentioned, earnest, and truly wants to help his clients talk through their issues and make progress toward their therapeutic goals. Unfortunately, Graham didn't have Dr. Hall's multicultural counseling course when he was working toward his MS in clinical mental health counseling, and as a result, he's going to face many struggles when attempting to work with clients who have diverse cultural, ethnic, and racial beliefs, backgrounds, and practices. We will observe Graham's interactions with his client and then provide some constructive criticism later in the presentation. Jenny W. is a second-generation Chinese American who was referred to Graham Jones by her primary care physician, Dr. Chang, because her physical symptoms, headaches, gastrointestinal issues, body pain, were found to have no medical cause. She's extremely wary of therapy and is only there at the insistence of her physician. She hasn't told anyone in her family about this visit for fear of their responses. In addition to her headaches and pains, Jenny's mind has been racing, filled with thoughts and concerns, and she's not really sure what to do. Last night, Jenny struggled to fall asleep because she was worried about her visit with Graham. No one in her family has ever been to therapy, and she wasn't sure what to expect. It was a restless night for Jenny, and her thoughts were a whirlwind. After Jenny arrived for her appointment, Graham's assistant ushered her into the office. She was nervous and was having stomach pains, but Graham was ready to dive right on in. He started the session by asking why she came to see him. Jenny quietly told him that her physician, Dr. Chang, referred her because of her physical symptoms. Graham's eyes brightened, and he told Jenny how he held Dr. Chang in such high esteem because he was such a brilliant doctor with degrees from 3 Ivy League universities. He then went on to say that so many of his own Chinese friends and colleagues were so accomplished with degrees from impressive colleges. Jenny began to feel more tense as she worried that Graham would shift the conversation and ask her about her education and career. Thankfully, he just chuckled, apologized for digressing, and refocused the conversation. Graham began anew by asking Jenny how he could help her. When she didn't respond, he asked for some information about her background. Again, Jenny cast her eyes down and tried to come up with a response. Unperturbed, Graham pressed on and tried to get Jenny to engage in some chit-chat so he could establish a connection with her. He asked if she was a student and if her family was from China or Japan. Jenny grew visibly uncomfortable with Graham's questions and began to watch the clock. She blurted out that both she and her parents were born in America. Graham seized that bit of information and began questioning Jenny about her relationship with her parents. She was totally overwhelmed by this point and made a decision that she would... Well, we're going to have to wait and see what Jenny decides about therapy because it's time to figure out how best to work with our Asian American and Pacific Islander clients in a culturally competent manner. Read, don't be like Graham. Hello, and welcome to our presentation on counseling Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. We look forward to sharing the information we learned while doing the research for and creation of this presentation. In the slideshow, certain pieces of information are in red typeface because we felt that these were very important to take away from this unit of study. One such example is part of the model minority myth, which we will discuss later. When counseling any client, we must remember that understanding a country or culture may help to better comprehend the big picture issues, but every person from that population is a unique individual with his or her own perspectives and beliefs. Sharing a birthplace or common language doesn't make clients similar, and we must avoid treating them with a one-size-fits-all approach. Be ready to participate at home with a pen and paper, and we hope you'll answer some of our questions in this week's online discussion board. Be ready to hit that pause button so you have time to get your answers down before the video continues. Additionally, we did narrate this video, but we'll never know if you mute it and just read it at your own pace. We hope you can really take something away from our presentation and welcome any questions or feedback on the discussion board. Thanks so much. Before we begin, let's see what you already know about Asian Americans and Pacific Island demographic. The guy on the right will be used in the presentation when we pose a question. Keep your eyes peeled for him. Consider the term Asian American and Pacific Islanders, API or AAPI, and make a list of the countries you think are included in this demographic. The Asian American and Pacific Islander API population is comprised of people from a wide range of cultures, with diverse languages, customs, and religions. The countries from which the API hail may have large westernized cities and outlying regions comprised of small towns and villages which are still very rural. Some of the groups which fall under the Asian American and Pacific Islander umbrella include Chinese Americans, Japanese Americans, Korean Americans, South Asian Americans, Southeast Asian Americans, and Pacific Islanders. Within these groups, there are additional subgroups with yet more unique customs, culture, and languages. According to Chang and O'Hara, 2013, Asian Americans include highly diverse groups of people who have a rich and varied history in the United States. Despite their common continental heritage, these individuals differ substantially in their language, culture, religion, and recentness of immigration. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, as of 2013, there are more than 20.8 million Asian American and Pacific Islanders living in the U.S., and their community is the fastest growing racial group in the country, growing over 4 times as rapidly as the total U.S. population and expected to double to over 47 million by 2060. Despite this tremendous growth, APIs are one of the most understudied racial groups in the country. Chinese Americans. One of the first Asian groups to immigrate to America, Chinese Americans have been helping to shape our country since the 1800s. Recent immigrants from the 1990s came to the United States educated and with transferable job skills, setting them apart from other refugees or immigrants. Confucianism influences the behaviors and worldview of Chinese Americans. In stark contrast to Western ideals of independence and autonomy, Chinese culture demands a collective view, which will be further discussed later in this presentation. Japanese Americans. In the late 1800s, an influx of Japanese arrived on American shores. As the generations flourished, progeny were educated in the American schools and considered themselves bicultural. The unconstitutional internment camps during World War II greatly impacted the second and third generations of these Japanese American immigrants. Heavily influenced by Confucian and Buddhist philosophy, Japanese Americans recognize that the family unit and hierarchy takes precedence over the individual. Korean Americans. The Korean American population in the United States is the 5th largest after Chinese, Asian Indians, Filipinos, and Vietnamese. Of all the API groups, Korean Americans are at the highest risk for mental distress because they tend to underutilize and mistrust mental health services. Like the Chinese and Japanese Americans, Korean Americans recognize hierarchical relationships and the importance of putting the group before the individual. Confucianism, Buddhism, and shamanism are the foundations of traditional Korean religious culture. South Asian Americans. Encompassing the countries of India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh, South Asia or East Asia is another dimension of the API group. Over the years, there have been a few major waves of immigration from South Asia as a result of changes to immigration laws. The language and culture of South Asian Americans is extremely diverse, with more than 18 major languages and hundreds of different dialects. Religiously, South Asian Americans are mostly influenced by Hinduism, Buddhism, and Islam. Southeast Asian Americans. Southeast Asian Americans are comprised of members of ethnic groups from countries like Laos, Thailand, Vietnam, Cambodia, Myanmar, Singapore, Hmong, and more. As with the previous populations, Southeast Asian countries feature many different languages and cultures within each country. Of all the populations of API, Southeast Asians are the most recent to come to America starting in the 1970s. This demographic seems to struggle more than the others with a transition to life in America and are less educated and less financially stable than the other groups. Pacific Islanders, encompassing the native people of Hawaii, Guam, Samoa, Polynesia, and Micronesia, Pacific Islanders are the smallest group of APIs in America. With limited research on native Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders, there isn't a vast understanding of the underlying issues with which this culture struggles. Some information points to a few common health issues like obesity and hypertension, and there are higher rates of high school dropouts in this demographic. Religion is vital as it serves as a connection between generations and helps the members deal with stress and struggles. The model minority, a word of caution. Asian Americans are frequently stereotyped as the model minority, and perception is that they experience few social and psychological problems when acclimating to life in America. Over the years, research has shown that the population does in fact suffer from a variety of mental health issues, but tend to underutilize services, and they terminate at a significantly higher rate than non-minority clients. The lower use of services is not indicative of a lower occurrence of mental health issues. While understanding a country or culture may help to better comprehend big picture issues, every person from that population is a unique individual with his or her own perspectives and beliefs. Sharing a birthplace or common language doesn't make clients similar, and we must avoid treating them with a one-size-fits-all approach. The American style of talk therapy is not common to Asian cultures, and additional care must be taken to facilitate a comfortable dialogue with clients.
Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders are the fastest growing racial group here in the United States, growing over 4 times as rapidly as the total U.S. population. But along with the growth comes problems, such as disparities in education, employment, housing, and even healthcare. For the next few minutes, we'll talk about what's being done to address these unique challenges and improve the quality of life for AAPIs. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Comcast Newsmakers. I'm Robert Trainum. Joining me today is Kiran Ahuja, the Executive Director for the White House Initiative on Asian American and Pacific Islands. Kiran, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
It is good to see you. As I mentioned a few moments ago, the population is growing rapidly, and I'm not sure the culture and the political, as well as the societal norms, if you will, are catching up with this rapid growth. Would you agree with that in the community?
I think there's a complete demographic shift that's taking place in this country. We're seeing growth in so many different communities. We're becoming more diverse, which I think requires for many of us, and I think this is something that's important for the work that I do at the White House Initiative, is paying attention to what our population looks like. And that we have to have a more nuanced understanding of all the different communities,
Sure.
and that one community is not
Monolithic or all
right,
the same.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And so I think a big part of that is recognizing that there is an interesting struggle taking place with the Asian American Pacific Islander community, in many ways battling against positive stereotypes.
Yeah. So
Um,
dispelling the myth, if you will,
Right.
and breaking down some of those sometimes perceived, sometimes real stereotypes out there.
Yeah, I mean, I think, to just kind of probably simplify it is, Asian Americans are healthy, wealthy, and wise, like all of them. And I think that that's a misconception, one that can be very harmful for many communities who do struggle every day with poverty, with accessing health services, with being able to put their children through school, those type of things. And those are the things that we try to, one, raise the visibility. So for example, some of those stats, because I think sometimes statistics are just to be able to maybe a shock to the system.
Sure.
Oftentimes people assume that almost all Asian Americans are in Ivy League schools. Well, more than half of the we say AAPI, but Asian American Pacific Islander student population are enrolled in community colleges. So knowing that many of them are first generation, some low income, trying to make their way through school, not necessarily all of us having the privilege of going to more, the four-year private institutions. Also, we know right now a lot of the work that a lot of the issues that we talked about recently at a White House summit was focused on health issues. So, in fact, in mental health, in particular, Asian American Pacific Islanders of any racial and ethnic group are least likely to access these services.
And it's funny you mention that because I'm not sure, and this is a stereotype, that many people that are watching this program at home or on a smart device would know something like
Right.
that. We got about a minute left. I want to talk for a few moments about going back to what you said about dispelling the myths and raising awareness, if you will. How are you doing that? Is it through Hollywood? Is it through music and song? Is it through advertising? Is it through role models? Is it a combination of all those things and other stuff?
I wish it was Hollywood. So we do have Asian American celebrities who really are very connected to um, their communities. I think Fresh Off the Boat does a lot for just kind of talking about the community in a fun way versus kind of those of us who always just talk about the policy. I think one of the things that I'd like to drive home with you is that the civil rights issue for the Asian American Pacific Islander community is none other than data disaggregation.
Sure. Yeah, that makes total sense.
So, and it's maybe not as sexy or kind of something that may like truly galvanize someone on the street, but unless we break down these communities, because I think right now, there was a long time where in certain counties, if you were Asian American, you had to check the box other. So unless you're going to know about and truly understand these communities, so data disaggregation and doing that inside government agencies as well as across the board in corporations is so critically important.
Well, speaking of importance, we need to have you back on to do a deeper dive on this hot topic issue because, as the country continues to get browner and the more and more we become the true nation of immigrants, we're going to have to raise the awareness on this and other topics. So we really appreciate you coming
I
in.
appreciate it.
And thank you for joining us for this edition of Comcast Newsmakers. I'm Robert Crano. Have a great day, everybody. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
After reviewing slide 12 and watching the short clip on the model minority myth, consider what impact this stereotype could have on students and potential clients. As a counselor, what approach might you employ when working with a client who is anxious about this stereotype?
Common API cultural values. We must consider important API values while counseling as they might shape a client's behavior, responses, or thoughts during therapy, such as collectivism. In several of the Asian cultures, the needs of the community or family are placed above the needs of the individual. Collectivism frequently involves a shared sense of honor or shame in the behavior of a family or community member. Filial piety. For many Asian people, family is an integral part of the life and members feature prominently in decisions about the life, the future, and other important issues. In some of the API cultures, the family structure is clearly delineated and formality is observed even within immediate family. Respect and responsibility for parents, elders, and ancestors is paramount. Tolerance of hardship. Many beliefs in the API culture put a strong emphasis on fate, and followers should endure their lots without complaint or interference. Humility and restraint. In many of the East Asian cultures, restraint of emotions, especially anger, is paramount. There is also a cultural call for humanity, respect, and dealing with personal issues privately. And wealth and education. Academic and professional services are seen as determinants of self-worth. While one should be humble about these achievements, they can also be considered a family duty. An overview of common API religions and philosophies. They are Confucianism, which is practiced primarily in East Asia and China. It is a philosophy that identifies 5 relationships will lead to social harmony and virtue. Buddhism, which is practiced throughout Asia, a religion that focuses on 4 noble truths about suffering, inappropriate desires, the ignorance from where they come, and the truth path to peace through enlightenment, which is achieved in part through meditation. Hinduism, primarily practiced in India and Nepal. Hinduism is a faith comprised of religious, cultural, and philosophical beliefs from the ancient Indian culture. It is centered on the major beliefs of an absolute being and karma. Shintoism. Practice in Japan. Shintoism focuses on interaction with the spiritual realm and connection with nature. Followers offer thanks, cleanse themselves and impurities, and visit shrines. Taoism is practiced in East Asia and China. Taoism is based on the principle that a person's fate is predestined and he or she must passively accept and find peace with his path. Islam, practiced in South Asia, India, Indonesia, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. Practicing Muslims believe in a single God, Allah, and in predetermined destiny. Adherence to the Quran, Muhammad, 5 acts of daily worship, and Islamic law are also pillars of the religion. Lastly, Christianity, practiced in the Philippines, Korea, and some parts of India and other areas. Christians believe in a single God and teachings of Jesus. There are different denominations which align with the person's belief. Complementary and alternative approaches to Western treatments. Thought it may be attempting to use approaches that have worked with Western clients. The Asian Americans and Pacific Islander clients might be uncomfortable with talk therapy. For many centuries, these groups have relied traditional approaches, and it's important to be aware of these options so we can better relate to our clients. Additionally, API associates stigma and loss of faith with admitting to psychological problems. As a result, in many Asian American Pacific Islander countries, individuals may often report somatic or physical manifestations of stress as they are viewed as more acceptable than psychological symptoms. Here are some examples of complementary and alternative medicine that APIs might utilize. Traditional Chinese herbal medicine. This approach is different from Western culture in that herbs are used to moderate life energies, body temperature, and physical state. These medicines are used to manage physical and mental symptoms. Ayurveda, which is an Indian tradition, this therapy focuses on reaching balance in the body by use of exercise, herbal medicine, massage, yoga, and meditation. Shamanism. In shamanism, spiritual guides help patients communicate with the spirit world to conjure healing. This practice has been observed in Japan, South Korea, China, Tibet, and Vietnam. China, South Korea, and Japan, and to a lesser extent, Taiwan, Tibet, and Vietnam. Complementary and alternative approaches to Western treatments. Morita therapy. Taken largely from Zen Buddhism, Morita therapy is used for treating anxiety, hypochondria, and phobias. The protocol calls for seeing days of isolation and bed rest, followed by occupational therapy and then reintegration into a person's job and family life. The treatment is designed to get patients to accept the anxiety rather than removal of it. Acupuncture. Acupuncture involves the insertion of needles into target parts of a person's body to clear the body's paths, meridians, so that the chi can free flow. Acupuncture has become more widely recognized in the West in recent years. Yoga, originally developed by Indian monks. Yoga is the practice of physical movement, refocusing energy, breathing, concentration, and calming of the mind. There are many variations of yoga and is often used as a form of meditation. Meditation, the act of taking a person beyond a state of thinking into relaxation or heightened awareness. Meditation aims to reduce stress and improve self-development. There are many types of meditation, including Tai Chi, Feng Shui, and I Chi. Considering cultural values, religion, and complementary and alternative medicine. If you were counseling an Asian American or Pacific Islander, one major challenge might be creating a sense of trust and therapeutic alliance so that counseling can continue beyond the first session. How might you utilize your knowledge of the various cultural values, religions, and/or CAM to build trust and a sense of comfort? Successfully engaging the API client. Keeping in mind that the Western talking therapy might be a challenge to utilize with the API client, counselors should take care to respect cultural values and make every effort to instill confidence and trust with the client. A broad explanation of therapy and some success stories might make the client more at ease in an initial session. This approach can reduce the stigma and shame that some clients may feel at seeking professional help. Emphasizing the seriousness of confidentiality might also help to allay a client's concerns. Work with an interpreter if the client's command of the English language isn't strong enough for effective communication. Because some clients will be accustomed to keeping neutral and suppressing emotions, counselors must be vigilant and watch for nonverbal cues. Show a genuine interest in learning about the client's culture and belief systems, respect their traditional values. Later, and with the client's consent, work to get the family involved and educate in the process of counseling. The therapeutic approach. Before beginning any type of talk therapy with an API client, be sure that rapport has been established. Consider information provided by the client during the intake session. Make sure language skills will allow for understanding and try to determine if the client identifies more with the Western or Asian culture, as this could guide the approach. One of the multitude of theories, the following seem to have most efficacy when working with the API clientele. They are cognitive behavioral therapy, family therapy, and motivational interviewing. Cognitive behavioral therapy. On a global scale, cognitive behavioral therapy has proven results in areas of depression, anxiety, and panic disorders, social phobias, post-traumatic stress disorder, and childhood depressive and/or anxiety disorders. Research suggests that CBT has been used effectively with depression and self-esteem in Chinese Americans and PTSD in Vietnamese refugees. Research indicates that Asian Americans favor a logical, rational, and directive counseling style over a reflective, affect-focused, non-directive one. CBT regimens typically provide time-limited, structured treatment that is based on an educational model and focuses on problem resolution. Furthermore, CBT regimens do not require in-depth discussion of developmental experiences or intraphysic conflicts, and therefore may be better suited to a culture that values emotional restraint. Family therapy. In the Asian American Pacific Islander cultures, family is an integral piece of a member's identity. Family therapy focuses on the systems and relationships within a family with the goal of improving communication, supporting the family structure, and utilizing both as catalysts for change. In joining with a family, the therapist lets himself or herself be organized by the basic rules that regulate the transactional process in the specific family system. The therapist should assist the family or the newly arrived members of the family in establishing a social support network so that the family or family members can reestablish a greater sense of differentiation of self and at the same time fulfill the need for social belonging. It is common for the pain and unresolved conflict of one generation to be suppressed or denied and then passed on and expressed in the next generation. Motivational interviewing. Research has shown that the use of motivational interviewing, especially in cases of addiction, are more effective than other approaches in API demographic. Researchers postulate that because of the shift from clinicians as experts to interviewer, the client identifies the best steps towards his or her own behavioral change. Motivational interviewing skills have been cited as part of the success in a study on treating substance abuse in the New York City API community in 2006. MI training and case management will enhance a counselor's ability to engage with and retain API clients.
Conclusion. Help seeking and service utilization in the Asian American and Pacific Islander demographic is lower than their representation in the U.S. population and lower than other racial and ethnic groups with cultural system. While this group generally does not seek counseling, research has shown that there are elevated rates of some clinical problems in some Asian subgroups, e.g., PTSD in Southeast Asians and suicide in elderly Asian women. Cultural barriers, values, and biases pose challenges to the gathering and interpretation of research. Future research is needed to gain insights and treatment protocols into the many subgroups of Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. Community outreach and education through churches or religious groups, schools, and community centers could be helpful ways in which the counseling profession might reach and connect with this group to make mental health counseling a more acceptable option. Hey, wait, you didn't forget about Graham and Jenny, did you? Come on, let's take what you just learned about counseling the API population, review Graham and Jenny's interaction, and see if Graham can turn this counseling session around before the 50 minutes are up. Considering the wealth of information we provided in our presentation, can you now identify some of the missteps Graham made when meeting with Jenny? Assuming that Graham knew Jenny was API based on the information given during the brief telephone intake, he should have known that many API clients are uncomfortable with the talk therapy approach before Jenny even walked through the door. He should have also kept in mind the huge stigma associated with the therapy in the API culture. The first session might have been better spent focused on laying a schema for the client by explaining what therapy is, how it helps clients, and emphasizing confidentiality. Think about the first thing Jenny said to Graham in their meeting, about why she was there. Many API clients are unwilling to go directly to therapy and instead will see a primary care physician for somatic issues related to mental health. Graham missed this opportunity because he fixated instead on the esteemed Dr. Chang instead of recognizing Jenny's mental health issues were manifesting physically. Additionally, his insensitive question about being Chinese or Japanese was a huge faux pas. He negated all other API ethnic groups with that question. Jenny's lack of response to direct questions, inability to make eye contact, and other physical cues flew right over Graham's head because he didn't know anything about counseling API and was so anxious to ask questions and establish rapport. After only 5 minutes in the session, Jenny had already decided not to return to therapy. Graham's lack of cultural knowledge about the Asian American and Pacific Island population would cause an early termination of service with this client. Additionally, his typically Western approach would serve to reinforce Jenny's beliefs that therapists don't get her and aren't for her, precluding her from seeking assistance with the issues she's contending with at present. While it's unfortunate to lose clients, it's far worse to damage their beliefs about therapy, potentially turning them off from seeking help with any other therapist ever again. If Graham had taken any multicultural classes or had even done any reading in the subject at all, he might have realized that there is more than one approach to take with clients from different cultural, racial, ethnic backgrounds. By spending a session or two outlining the basics of therapy, what a client should expect, and some success stories, the terms of confidentiality, and answering the client's questions, Graham would have built a strong foundation with Jenny, which might have allowed her to change her perception of therapy. He would have been cautious of trying to engage Jenny in a more traditional talk therapy, and might have moved forward with motivational interviewing style or even a CBT approach. Any or all of these techniques could have helped Graham establish trust and an understanding in the first few sessions, and then they could have developed a therapy commitment and moved on to the actual counseling after that. Through this presentation, we have now learned some of the approaches and techniques that might help us establish trust and rapport with Asian American and Pacific Island clients. Of course, our learning can't stop here. We need to stay current on promising and successful research and studies, and we will then be able to help clients like Jenny work through their mental health issues and break down the walls and stigma that keep this population from using and staying with therapy and counseling services. Let's work hard to help multicultural clients like Jenny feel that they have advocates who empathize with their unique situations, appreciate their culture, and are eager to help them get through the issues that they are facing.